and just continue to go back and forth with your warms and your cools until you're satisfied. Right now I'm just trying to achieve a little bit more of a darker gray color, a barnwood color. But one thing is you want to keep your Well, I've painted a lot of barn paintings over the years, one of my favorite subjects to paint. And here's one thing I've observed. People love to look at old rustic barn paintings. Collectors like to buy them. Artists love to paint them. And I think the reason is just their old rustic character and nature and appeal and charm. Impressionistically paint a rustic old barn on plein air. It's gonna be so much fun. I'm gonna show you step by step. It's gonna be a blast. Well, you'll be able to go out yourself and confidently paint a barn on plein air impressionistically and make a beautiful piece of artwork. And don't forget to stay tuned to the end. I will give you a power tip. You're not gonna wanna miss that one. Nope. Plein air painters, this is Terry with Learning Plein Air. If you're new to this channel, we're here to help beginner plein air painters learn and improve their skills in plein air painting and make beautiful paintings and to bring joy to their lives. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. We're here for you every week. We're on a Colorado high mountain plein air adventure every week to help you study and get tips and techniques to help you become a greater plein air painter. Well, we're here in Telluride, Colorado, one of my favorite places to paint, and we're gonna paint barns. I'm so excited. Tip number 1A would be no trespassing. Yeah, most of the time I do obey that, I guess, maybe. Okay, we're just making our way to painting location here. Four-wheel drive dolly came in handy today. As always, gonna switch to the sled pretty soon because we have snow. Painting chair, tennis balls for mud and snow. Let's look at our setup here. We've got a 16 by 20 canvas set up here with some paints. Let's take a quick round of the paints that I use. If you're new joining us here, we've got some titanium white right here, yellow ochre, permanent rose, alizarin crimson, cad red, cad orange, cad medium, cad yellow light, phthalo green, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, phthalo blue. I use oil paint. Again, I always recommend if you're a beginner to try to use cheap oil paints and use a lot of paint. Don't be afraid to use it. I've got odorless terpenoid right there to mix in the early stages of my painting process. Backpack, French Julian easel, canvas that I'm using today. I put some cardboard on the back of it because the light shines through those. Really hard to judge colors, so I put that there. Let's take a quick look at the brushes that I use. I've got a couple palette knives. I use mostly larger brushes. Number 12 filberts are kind of my main weapon of choice. A couple of those. Some other smaller filberts, number 8s, number 6s. And I've got a Robert Simmons Signet brush right here. Real long bristles and a flat brush, which I'll probably use today. We're doing a barn painting. That'll come in handy. Hog's hair bristles. Brushes are important as you progress and get better at painting. In the beginning, not as important. I would go for cost-effective brushes and just learn your techniques. Of course, Millie is here today with me, my plein air companion. Always able, willing, and ready at a moment's notice to protect me or jump into the painting if needed. And then last but certainly not least is the scenery we're painting here in Telluride, Colorado. These barns, that is unbelievable right there. That's Mount Wilson, over 14,000 feet tall. Was on the Coors Light or the Coors Banquet beer cans years ago. Just kind of a signature mountaintop peak here in Colorado and around the US. We're gonna zero in on this barn right here. There are 3 structures that are historic preservation structures on this site. I'll talk more about it during the painting. It's gonna be an awesome, beautiful scene for us. Let's go. If you're new with us, the first thing that we do, the first stage is the drawing stage of my painting process, where I put on a thin wash, just a thin layer of a paint of color of your choice with some odorless terpenoid to thin it out. Doesn't matter what color you use. I'm just using a warm color today. It's a nice warm early winter day. I think that'll contrast nicely with the opposing and complementary colors in the landscape, the purples and the shadows and the barn colors. So in the drawing stage, we essentially want to do a wash, and then real quickly, let me go through my 4 P's if you haven't heard that before. Pieces, placement, proportion, and perspective. We want to basically break the complex landscape down into 3 to 5 manageable pieces that we can make sense of for a strong value foundation, foundational values, and also so we can have a good composition and make sense of it. And then proportion. Today, especially with barns, I want to make sure that the size of my barn is correct and it's in the right place. So pieces placement, the placement of it, it has its own boundary where it's supposed to go in a proper place. And then perspective. Importantly today with barns, we're going to want to make sure that our lines on the barns go off to the horizon, the vanishing point, in the proper perspective. So that's going to be important. Pieces, placement, proportion, perspective. And as we go here, next I'm going to put it on a time lapse, and I'm just going to show you how I do my drawing. And I will show you the 3, 4, 5 pieces we're going to break this down into, okay? Here we go. All right, I'm back with you. So let's just review what we did there in the drawing stage. I quickly and loosely just show where my shadows are. The whole mountain is in shadow pretty much, except for some highlights. Let's talk about the barn perspective. With these barn lines, tip number 1 right here, your barn lines have to be accurate and in line with proper perspective. Basic perspective, as you know, the horizontal lines should go to the vanishing point or eyesight or eye line, which for me is right about here in the painting. So interestingly, part of the barn is at about eye level, and part of it I'm looking down. Part of the barn is below my eye level. So the roof of the barn is about at eye level. So it's going to go toward the vanishing point just like that. Not much of a change in direction or angle. This part of the roof is a little more below me so that the line goes toward the vanishing point. Okay, and then this part of the ground is going to go like this and tilt downward to show this hill, the perspective of this hill kind of cutting off the foreground of the barn. I want to make sure that it's not too big in the painting. Here I've made it a little bit bigger than it actually is in the painting. Not much, I'd say about 20% larger, because I want to teach on it and focus on it and learn from it. Last thing we do is we kind of denote our darkest dark in the painting, because it keys the painting for all other colors. And that's how I was taught with Russian Impressionism. And for me, the darkest dark in this painting really is this part of the barn right here that's in shadow. It's kind of where the horses used to go, right in here. And then I've got some other darkest darks, some little evergreen trees and shrubs that are here. And then another darkest dark is on this little hill right here above the barn. There's a hill that comes down, and there's some little kind of juniper, scrub oak bushes, not sure what they are, but we're ready to go to the next stage, the abstract stage, where I block in these pieces. This is our fence. We're showing proper perspective with this fence. So again, the lines on the fence are going to go toward the vanishing point. The fence is below me, so I need to show the lines go properly toward the vanishing point. All right, so the abstract stage, we're just trying to quickly and very thinly block in these pieces. And blue, Alizarin Crimson, and that's this this barn piece kind of right in there that's real dark. There's lots of beautiful reflected light in there too that we're going to be able to capture. I've got a mixture of some green, a dark green right here, using ultramarine blue, cad yellow, a little bit of alizarin crimson, some red, and I'm just going to briefly put those on where I'm going to put these dark bushes and evergreen trees that are in the landscape as well, because they'll be darker in the foreground. I have my darkest darks in place. I'm going to go ahead and put the sky in real quick, and I think that'll help me judge some colors as well. And I've got a mixture of cerulean blue, I've got some cad yellow light, and just a touch of permanent rose. Anytime you have a sky, there's going to be a little bit of purple in there due to some atmospheric effects and the way the sky is. So you always want to mix a little bit of a red or a purple, a red or a alizarin crimson or magenta in with your blue color. And I've got some titanium white in there as well. When you come lower toward the horizon, there's going to be more, it's going to be lighter, you know, so don't forget to show that. I'm going to leave a little bit of the orange yellow underneath for an effect, just as an artist's choice. We'll see how we like it or how we do with it, you know, as we go here. But I'm just kind of carving into the mountain shape that we did. You can do some brush strokes just like this, apart from each other, just like that, if you'd like, with different colors to show some effects as light and cools are next to each other. Kind of a common trick in Impressionism, or technique more than a trick, I guess. All right, with this far off mountain piece number 1, it's very purple, it's light in value, it's a beautiful color, but remember kind of our techniques that the further you go away from the foreground, it's going to be cooler in color and lighter in value. So I've mixed up some cobalt blue, a little bit of permanent rose, and I've desaturated it with some orange. As you know, complementary colors, using those, orange and violet together, kind of gray down and desaturate when you do that. So I don't want to make this too bright, is what I'm saying. So let's go ahead and get it on there just really quick. Let's just see how it looks. I think that's a good color to start with right there. I just got a big number 12 brush and I'm blocking it in real quick. At this point, I'm not really worried about a masterpiece. So let's just get this in real quick using the right color, the right value, and the right temperature. If you want to watch last week's video, that's what we discussed, the 3 questions that you want to ask yourself when you plein air paint, and look for these little pieces as you try to get those in. What color is it? What value is it? And what temperature is it? Do I need to make it lighter or darker? Ask yourself. Do I need to make it warmer or cooler? So I'm going to follow the outline of the barn here. I want to keep that in place and go around that. I'm going to try to go even quicker than I usually do on this mountain because I want to spend a lot of time on the barn. That's kind of why we're here, for the barn. I'm a mountain guy. I love painting mountains, so I had to pick a barn with a mountain in it today. Mountain resort, ski town, internationally known. In fact, I hate to name drop, but this is the neighborhood that this area here is where Tom Cruise has a house. It's called Alizarin Ranch, and it has an interesting history. Sheep farmers that came over, as I understand it, and really these barns were built, I think, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and then later was turned into a real estate development high in the mountains up here. Let's leave it there and let's get on to the barn. Okay, let's look at this barn up close here. Tip number 2 for painting old rustic barns is you got to nail the light and shadow properly. So let's look at this. Part of the barn is in shadow, if you'll notice, and part of it is in light. The roof is in light, and so I need to nail that temperature, that value, that color properly. The rest of the barn is in shadow. The front of the barn is in shadow, but it's not as dark as that horse corral area. That's very dark, and that's a part of my darkest dark. So when you're painting a barn, you got to think about light, shadow, cast shadow. See the shadows in the snow there? Those are called cast shadows. I want to be able to show those. You've got reflected light. See the horse corral there? There's some reflected light in there because there's holes in the wood because it's so old. And light is getting inside and reflecting from the grass and from the sky and from all directions. So that's going to be fun to show. And then you want to look and see, are there any highlights on the barn? I think in the snow there'll be some nice highlights on the roof because the sun is shining directly on that snow. Okay, so that's tip number 2. All right, let's go commando with the camera here, and I want to show you some color mixing as far as what we just talked about with the light and the shadow. So I've got a mixture here of some titanium white and just a grayish mixture. Some of what I had on the palette before with purples and reds, and I'm just evaluating it. It's probably going to be good for the shadow color in the front of the barn. Let's look at the darkest dark and go into some Alizarin Crimson, and let's just put it beside it so we can judge the colors and values correctly. So I'm going to put Alizarin Crimson on there, and then it's kind of a purple reddish blue color. So I'm going to grab some ultramarine blue. I could grab some phthalo blue, a real cool blue color right there. Don't overmix the colors when it comes down to it. Just put them in there real quickly like that. I'll put a little cad orange in there. See what that looks like. I'm going to throw a little permanent rose in that color until I see something I like, and I think we'll go with that for now. And then let's go with the roof color. It's gray, so it's a very warm gray. So I'm going to grab some titanium white. I'm going to try to warm it up. Titanium white is a cool color by itself, so I need to warm it up. I'm going to take some yellow ochre right here. So I'm going to put a little yellow ochre in there. I'm going to go for just a little bit of cerulean blue, a very cool blue color, because it's kind of that like bluish gray barnwood color. It's become very popular in interior decorating as of late. A little more titanium white. It's getting pretty close. I like that. It's more of a greenish color though. So what's the complementary color of green on the color wheel, red. So yeah, I just dipped in a little bit of red to gray it down and not make it as green. So I like that color. Let's roll with it for now. We're just blocking in and going quick. I want to show you some close-up brush strokes as we go here in the block in abstract stage. Okay, so let's go for that dark color first. I'm going to dip in a little bit of turpenoid there in the corner, and let's go for that dark right there and go over our darkest dark shadow color. And we'll refine that a little bit later as we go. The front of the barn that's in shadow. I'm going to go a little more titanium white and a little more cerulean blue, because as I'm looking at it, it's a real cool gray color, and it's actually a little darker than that. So I'm going to go with a little permanent rose. That's what you want to do as an oil painter, is constantly be evaluating when you throw something down on the canvas. It may not always be right at first. Don't need to worry about it. That's a little bit better, I think. Kind of a cooler gray color, but it needs to be darker. So as I evaluate it, it needs to be darker. Can you see that it's not much darker than piece number 1? So that needs to be darker. I'm going to go with a little more Alizarin Crimson, a little more cerulean blue. It's too much blue. A little more yellow ochre. Let's leave it right there and see. I'm just going to put a little permanent rose in there, which is a very cool color. So we have a variety of brush strokes. The roof comes down like this. There's kind of that little horse barn part of the barn that we got to show. It goes up like that. All right, so that's a good start. I think I want to make that a little more gray as we go. So tell you what, let's just do it now. Add a little bit of cad orange, which is the complementary color of violet. So what that's going to do is it's going to gray it down, but I'm not going to cover the whole piece. So watch, I'm going to go in the direction of the boards like this, and just very quickly, loosely, just put that color in there so it's part of the equation. And the foreground of the barn happens like this. There's a hill that comes in front of it. You can see that. Let's take a look at it. Right there. And we can show some nice light and shadow in there with the snow as well. Another thing we could do is we could use the pallet knife with a barn, which is real fun. So let's go back to that darkest dark piece, the horse stable, and just get a big old glob of it on. Okay, so let's go back to this piece right here, and we could just use that pallet knife and just go like that, which is kind of fun. Just with some broad, thick strokes, just let the paint slide on there. Tip number 2 there, following the light and shadow, go into some Alizarin Crimson. One of the darkest things on the barn is the roof line. So let's look at it and just kind of outline it a little bit. So horse stable comes down there. The roof line is there. Roof line comes down there. A little bit of shadow there. Shadow right here at the base of the barn. So let's just show that. Dissipates into the hillside. Show those strokes real quick. Let's go from this side. It's looking kind of fun. Let's keep cruising. Try to follow my lines. It's lighter in color. You can see that I want to maybe blue it up a little bit more than that. So I'm going to dip into a little cerulean blue. Kind Kind of blew that up a little bit and see how that looks. I like it. And then the other roof is getting a little more sunlight. There's something nice happening right now on the roof of that barn, and I'm just going to catch it. There's a shadow. The sun is shifting in the sky, so I'm going to show it real quick. Go into some cobalt blue, bluer still. Okay, let's leave that for now. It's probably a little too blue, but in fact, let's dip into a little orange, complementary color, and just horse stable area right here. It's very dark. Going to go into some phthalo blue along with some alizarin, and just let the colors run with each other. Don't really mix them in completely. This line, I have to remember, comes up and goes down, so I got to keep that line with the barn and make sure it's accurate. A little bit of yellow ochre, some orange, a little yellow, cad yellow. Okay, let's take some thick paint, thick paint, and get that barn roof color on. I think I actually got some rocks in there. Make sure I distinguish that roof line, keep that in there. It's a nice warm light color. The wood is going down in this direction, so I'm going to try to show that. Tip number 3 is coming up here in a minute, so stay tuned. So far we got some nice contrast going of light and shadow, dark and light, warm and cool. I don't like how it looks exactly, but I'm creeping up on it. Sometimes that's how it goes in plein air painting. I think what I need to do, I don't want to do it because I want to stay on the barn for you, but I need to get the surrounding colors around it real quick because that's going to change how those colors look. Using ultramarine blue and some cad yellow, and then adding some red to it to gray it down. Again, opposing or complementary colors if you want to gray something down. It's winter, so the grass isn't too dark, isn't too alive. I'm going to leave some of the orange showing underneath because the sun is shining on it. Some of that orange color in there. In fact, I'm going to dip into cad orange right now and just kind of put that beside that green color. So I'm going to show that. I'm just going to quickly go like this just to kind of get that color in there so I can judge the barn. Keep the outline of my fence in there for the most part, but okay, and leave some of that orange underneath the undertone. See how that changes the dynamic of things. I'm going to go even warmer with some colors on this hillside, so I'm going to put more orange in my green mixture and more yellow to warm it up right here, but leave some of the green showing to create some lighting effects and some contrast and some interest. A different color green, adding a little cad yellow light, a cooler green, because the light is more prevalent in that part of the painting. Right there. See again how that changes the harmony of things. Always compare as a plein air painter. We went over that in a previous video. The best plein air painters compare their shapes, their colors, their values every time you put it down. It totally changed the dynamic of the painting right there. I like it. That roof is mostly in shadow, the top roof now, which is kind of interesting. So the decision is, do you change it or do you keep it? I'm going to leave it both light and shadow like this, how it was 20 minutes ago. I like that. There's some snow in front of the barn that I want to show, so I'm going to use some phthalo blue. It's in complete shadow, and it's a very cool blue color, so I'm going to use the coolest colors that I can. Phthalo blue, titanium white, alizarin crimson, but I'm going to keep it on the side of the blue family. So I'm going to go back into phthalo, which is very cool, and I'm going to go like that. See how cool that is? There's too much phthalo in there. Phthalo is a very powerful color. You got to watch that, phthalo blue. So I'm going to put a little more titanium white over it. Another thing we can do to cover some real estate quickly is use the pallet knife. It's a nice effect. Just real quickly, just like that. Right here, up against it. A little more blue. That violet color is nice, but it's not the right color for me. It's too strong, too powerful. So, right here, we just show some shadow snow coming up and bumping up into the light. Snow kind of playing off each other, warm and cool. It'll come together. You know what I do. It's messy and abstract all the way until the end, and then I kind of bring it together, hopefully. We'll see. I'm not sure it's going to happen this time. Okay, equally in the snow, there's some light. All right, so let's just go ahead and show the light in the snow. Maybe that'll help make some more sense of those pieces for you. A lot of cars coming through here. I apologize for the noise. I'll try to keep it out. But I don't know, I think it's all these workers on Tom Cruise's house or something, man. There's like construction workers coming through every 5 seconds. My buddy Tom. Let's go back to the barn. All right, here's tip number 3. Let's get into it. All right, tip number 3 when you're talking about barns is to not overmix the colors. Let me be specific here. Okay, so let's look at this barn again. You can see that it's changing in light and shadow, but one thing with a rustic barn, tip number 3, is that you don't want to overmix your colors because there's lots of beautiful different grays and colors in the wood as it changes over the years. And so let me show you what I mean by that specifically. We can show that by the way we mix our colors, okay? So let's look at it.
So a close-up of the barnwood in shadow so far shows that we already do have a good variation in color, kind of like I want. We could leave it like this if we wanted to, but let's look at some paint mixing techniques on how to accomplish this effect. You could make a bunch of different pools or puddles and then dip into each one with your brush simultaneously and just kind of skid your brush across all 3 puddles and then leave that color of all 3 puddles on your brush. Right now, I'm just, collecting a bunch of different colors and I'm putting them in a pile. I've got some Alizarin Crimson, I've got some blues, and then just dipped into some yellow ochre there. And I'm going to grab some orange and some yellow. So I'm going to put 4 or 5 colors here in the same pile just to show you an effect that we can do. And then you don't want to overmix them. So once you have all your colors situated in the pile, just kind of maybe go back and forth with your brush one time and mix them really quickly, but don't overmix. And then that's the color that you're going to use. So I got some titanium white. We'll put it in that puddle. Just do it 2 or 3 times. Grab your color. And then just squarely face your brush to the barn and slowly go down and let the magic happen. Let those colors roll off your brush. It really is a beautiful effect. Dip back in, get another color if you want. Make it more warm or more cool. Right now I'm just doing some warm colors, but it's still in shadow, so I don't want to do too warm. They're kind of a cooler warm color, if you will. And I'm just going to spread them out. As you can see, I'm not covering the whole barn with them. I want to make it look like wood, impressionistically. And now what we can do is dip into the cool colors and just mix those however you want. And again, don't overmix. Get some blues, get some reds, and then go over the warm colors so that you have those striations and those different barn colors like that. It's a really beautiful effect. So then just continue to go back and forth with your warms and your cools until you're satisfied. Right now I'm just trying to achieve a little bit more of a darker gray color, a barnwood color. But one thing is you want to keep your value structure, your value foundation in place. So don't go too light, don't go too dark, keep the same values, but mix up your colors a little bit between warms and cools. Do a quick little look here, a close-up. Looks pretty good, I'm happy.
Let's just take a quick look at Walt Gonski and some of his barns. If you look at that kind of rainbow effect we were talking about earlier, where you put a bunch of different colors on your brush and you kind of mix it and just let that brush kind of go across the barn with different colors coming off it, call it a rainbow technique. You can see it again here in this roof. See that right there? Just beautiful. And again here, just a master at doing these barn roofs, and really admire this artist, and I think it'd help you to kind of look at this as well. So here I'm in the forming stage of my 4-step technique, and we're just going over the roof and adding the light in and just refining everything and really trying to bring the barn home for finish. Try to keep my strokes in the direction that the barn wood is moving if I can. I want to keep all my lines in place, my perspective. But I'm really trying to make it look impressionistic. So I'm trying to use as few strokes as I can and just use thick strokes and a lot more thick paint at this stage. Okay, now we want to work on our shadows, following the lines of the barn. We kind of lost those having fun with our mixed paint experiment, but I want to define the eaves troughs, the outline of the barn, to give it some shape and a little more definition, and just kind of add that shadow in there. It's a dark Alizarin Crimson blue color, and you can use the tip of your brush, the side of your brush, to go downward and suggest some of those shadows in the barnwood that occur, when you see an old barn, because the wood is separated. So make sure to show those. You can use a palette knife, or you can just use a small brush. I think I'm using a number 6 filbert right now. The other thing is you want to show some reflected light up there. There's always light that gets reflected from the ground into the eaves trough, and it's usually, with barns, it can be a cool orange color. So let's just go ahead and show you now with the palette knife. Just get a big old glob of paint in the side of your palette knife, and if you want to make those barnwood slat shadows with the knife, you can kind of just sporadically do those in a non-uniform way, and I like how it looks right now. And before we move on to the snow on the top of the barn roof, let's just go ahead and put some more shadow slats in on the roof. And next we'll move on to the snow and the light and shadow on the roof there. Okay, just using thick paint. When the snow comes down on a barn roof, it's in the mountains, it can be pretty thick snow, and so there's shadow underneath there. So I'm just trying to get that grayish blue color right now. Using thick paint, let's get some cad yellow and some titanium white and get the light portion of that snow in there too. Next, I'm going to add some warms into my darkest dark color in the horse stable area there and show some reflected light coming in. Just some oranges and some reds into that purplish mixture to make it look a little more realistic. So let's go back to the roof here real quick, because in the mountains the sun sets pretty early and I'm seeing it set right before me, so I want to roll with the light changes as I see them. It's really beautiful. So there's a little more contrast on that roof and a little more warm colors I need to add, and I'm just redefining my shadows as well. And next I want to go with a dark green mixture here and just redefine those evergreen trees and juniper trees that were in the foreground that act as part of my darkest dark. I lost those, so I want to go back and just get those in, because those will really help me show space and depth in my painting. And I'm just using a dark green mixture. Another important thing you want to do with barn paintings is you always want to show contrast. Contrast creates interest. So my front of the barn is in shadow. So what I'd like to do here is I'm seeing some really amazing lighting effects with the sun setting on the hay, the grass that's in front of the barn. So that warm color will contrast beautifully with the cool barnwood shadow color. And I want to just kind of show that throughout on the snow too. It's another color, it's a warmer color that will contrast nicely with the cool colors in the snow. And again, along the same lines, as we shape that foreground piece and form it, you want to put some darks in, and they're part of your darkest darks, and that'll really help produce some contrast in that front foreground piece with the snow. Now look at this piece to the left that I'm working on. It's a cool forest that's in shadow. It's a very cool temperature and color, but look at that compared to my barn roof. That's a nice contrast. So this piece to the left is very, very important in the overall harmony of what I'm trying to accomplish here in the painting. All right, just as light and shadow is important on the barn structure, it's equally important in the landscape. So now I'm just refining some of my shadows, which move left to right. So right here, we're just giving some definition to this hillside behind the barn with some snow highlights, just to give a little bit more perspective and definition to the pieces behind the barn. Now let's work on the sky a little bit. I'm going to use a mixture of cerulean blue, a dab of Alizarin Crimson, and some titanium white for my sky color. It's a very light value. Don't want to go too dark. It's a very bright, sunny bluebird day here in Colorado. I'm going to let some of the orange wash color show through to kind of accent that bright sunshiny feel that's out there. And we'll just try to get the mountain color in real quick here. I realize it's a barn painting, but for me, I always talk about the importance of comparing one piece to another. So although we're working on a barn, all the other surrounding pieces are crucial to making that barn look great and look realistic and have the look and feel of a bright, sunny, high mountain, snowy day. And so there's some warms appearing in the mountain right now from the sunset. I'm going to work on the snow just a little bit, just very, very quickly here to finish up things. Using the palette knife for a different effect. I go over it later with the brush most times. Okay, let's zoom in tight here with some close-ups on brush strokes. I think overall our 3 top tips on rustic barns really helped us achieve a good little rustic barn plein air piece today. Take a look at the palette, and we got a lot of different color mixtures going on there. Man, that was so fun painting that barn. Thanks for joining me. Hey, don't forget to watch another video. It really does help support this channel. And God bless. We'll see you next time up in the mountains. Take care. All right, well, we're back in the studio, and as promised, here is this episode's power tip. And for today's power tip, we're going to look at an artist whose name is Walt Gonski, kind of a legend plein air painter, a hero for me. And we're going to look at something that's called dry brush technique. I want to zero in this part of the barn right here. And one thing you can do, you can wait for your painting to dry a couple days and do this, or you can do it toward the end of your painting as well. And it's simply just taking some paint without mixing any mediums with it and just kind of dipping in and going onto the barn and really just doing a light dry brush technique where you just lightly let the brush go across the surface of the painting, and you kind of get an effect that looks like that. Can you see that right there? That's called a dry brush technique right there. And it looks really rustic. It looks really cool. It's another kind of something different you can do.